On today's show, Donald Trump announces he will sign an executive order Friday changing the Defense Department's name to the War Department, and the Pentagon, the building, will be renamed the Joy Behar is a low IQ individual Ministry of Blowing Up People of Color. That doesn't sound like a good idea. Meeting with the president of Ecuador, Secretary of State Marco Rubio declared the U.S. airstrike killing 11 on board a Venezuelan boat, allegedly carrying drugs. Well, that's just the beginning, as the Trump administration will work with Central American countries to stop the flow of narcotics into our country. Or we could do treatment on demand, free mental health care, be a lot cheaper. We could do that. Donald Trump claiming that as commander-in-chief, he possesses the authority to launch military strikes against drug cartels ever since he declared these drug cartels terrorist organizations back in February. The Trump administration citing as legal justification the 2001 authorization for the use of military force approved by Congress right after 9/11. They gave the president authority to wage war around the world on any terrorist organization linked to the people who took down the World Trade Center. I don't think Venezuelan drug cartels were in on that. Meanwhile, the Pentagon and the president have failed to offer any evidence that the ship they took out was in fact carrying narcotics. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Trump's director of Health and Human Services, testified Thursday before the Senate Finance Committee, which demanded answers on the recent firing of the newly confirmed director of the Centers for Disease Control, who Kennedy forced out after she refused to fire several officials who Kennedy objected to because they didn't share his anti-vax policies. 4 other CDC officials resigned in the immediate aftermath of her firing in order to protest. During testimony, Kennedy said he believed mRNA vaccines, like the COVID ones, are dangerous and deadly. Kennedy, in a heated exchange with Republican Senator Bill Cassidy, who's a doctor, Kennedy said, quote, "The vaccine killed more people than the virus did," unquote. He repeated that claim later, again, during his testimony, which echoes previous statements outside the committee, where Kennedy has said the COVID vaccines, quote, were the deadliest vaccines ever made. Senator Cassidy asked if Donald Trump deserved a Nobel Prize for Operation Warp Speed, which created the COVID vaccine at the end of his first administration. Kennedy said, yes, Donald Trump deserves a Nobel for warp speed. And then Senator Cassidy said, well, how do you reconcile your support for Trump getting a Nobel for Operation Warp Speed if just moments ago you told Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado that the COVID vaccine killed more people than the virus? Kennedy grew defensive and then lied, insisting, I never said that. Play the tape. He did say it, said it twice. At one point, Senator Mark Warner of Virginia asked, do you accept the fact that 1 million Americans died from COVID? Kennedy answered, I don't know how many died. Warner asked if COVID vaccines prevented people from dying from COVID. Kennedy responded, I would need to look at the data in order to answer that question. Senator Warner then turned to the committee chair and said, quote, the Secretary of Health and Human Services doesn't know how many Americans died from COVID. He doesn't know if the vaccine helped prevent any deaths. And you are sitting as Secretary of Health and Human Services. How can you be that ignorant, unquote? How can you be that ignorant? Well, if he weren't that ignorant, Donald Trump would have never nominated him. Kennedy was also criticized for cutting $500 million in federal funding for new mRNA research and issuing new protocols, making it increasingly harder for Americans to get vaccinated to prevent this fall's new strain of COVID. Senator Elizabeth Warren reminded Kennedy that earlier this year during his confirmation hearings, he promised that COVID vaccines would be available for free to anyone who wants them. She said, however, thanks to his new protocols, insurance companies will not cover the cost of the vaccine for most people. Senator Warren said, "You promised that you would not take away vaccines from anyone who wanted them. It takes it away if you can't get it from your pharmacy. It takes it away if you have to pay $200 for a shot." Bobby Kennedy, liar, and that worm in his brain gorging itself on Bobby Kennedy's increasingly smaller brain. Donald Trump's recent takeover of the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts is turning out to be a financial disaster. The Washingtonian reporting that people are not buying tickets, with several dance companies expected to perform this month and next month before houses that are anywhere between 4% and 19% full. Former President Joe Biden back in May announced that he is being treated for an aggressive form of prostate cancer that spread to his bones. Biden, seen in public yesterday with a large bandage on his forehead, a spokesperson confirming Biden just underwent surgery to remove skin cancer lesions. 2 years ago, lesions from Biden's chest were removed and came back testing positive for basal cell carcinoma. New York City Mayor Eric Adams, running for re-election as a third-party candidate and polling in the single digits, denying or lying he met with Trump officials who offered him a job at the White House if he would drop out of this November's mayoral race in order for the disgraced former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, also running as a third-party candidate, to get a better chance of defeating Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic Socialist and New York State Assemblyman who won the Democratic nomination for mayor back in June. And recent polls show him with more than 50% of the vote. Mayor Adams' predecessor, Bill de Blasio, who served 2 terms as mayor of New York, endorsed Mamdani this week. De Blasio said Mamdani's promises of affordable housing, free city buses, and universal child care are not impossible, adding that when I ran, nobody thought I could deliver universal preschool, but I did. That's right. New York City, thanks to Mayor de Blasio, has universal preschool. And you know who tried to stop that? Andrew Cuomo, who was governor of New York State at the time. The Justice Department doing damage control after a hidden video captured a Justice Department official promising conservative activist James O'Keefe that should the Epstein files ever get released, Pam Bondi would see to it that Donald Trump and every Republican are redacted from it. The tape also captures the woman saying people, if the files are released, would only see the names of liberals and Democrats in them. James Comer, the Republican chairman of the House Oversight Committee, declared that transcripts from Ghislaine Maxwell's 2-day interview with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche completely exonerated Donald Trump. Well, I guess there's no point in having any more hearings, right, Jim? His Oversight Committee then released 33,000 pages of documents from the Epstein files that his committee subpoenaed from the Justice Department. But Democrats on that committee saying there is nothing in those documents they haven't seen before except for an additional surveillance video from outside Epstein's jail cell the night he killed himself. And that was released along with some new flight logs. But there's definitely nothing new inside the documents that the Justice Department handed over to Jim Comer's Republican-controlled Oversight Committee, and some are accusing Republicans of releasing just enough from the Epstein files in order to convince lawmakers not to support this discharge petition circulated by House Republican Thomas Massie and House Democrat Ro Khanna, this discharge petition calling on the House to vote in favor of subpoenaing the entire contents of the Epstein files. Speaker Mike Johnson is attempting to block that vote, So a discharge petition, as I've gone over, is a parliamentary maneuver that circumvents the speaker and brings the motion to the floor. The Trump White House called the discharge petition, quote, a hostile act. Yes, getting to the bottom of the Epstein files is an act of hostility. Speaker Mike Johnson opposes the discharge petition, saying the Epstein case is being thoroughly investigated by the House Oversight Committee right now. Yes, and the chairman, Jim Comer, just declared that Donald Trump has been fully exonerated based on maybe 1/10 of the Epstein files. But Mike Johnson says, no, we don't need to subpoena all the Epstein files. We got Jim Comer on top of it. So, well, in order for the discharge petition to go through, Massey and Khanna need 218 signatures. All 212 House Democrats are expected to sign the discharge petition. Right now, that petition has 215 signatures, three shy. Besides Massey, three other Republicans have signed the petition. They are Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, and Nancy Mace. On Wednesday, Massey and Khanna staged a 2-hour press conference surrounded by some of Epstein's victims, included Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's not an Epstein victim. She's somebody's victim. I don't know whose, but something happened to her. But she spoke out in favor of releasing all the files. And then some of Epstein's victims spoke. They too spoke and called for a full release of the Epstein files. One survivor, Lisa Phillips, said because the Justice Department denies the existence of a client list, she is working with other victims and attorneys to compile what they call their own Epstein client list made up of high-profile and powerful men who Epstein forced these girls to have sex with. Speaker Mike Johnson held a closed-door 2-hour meeting with some of Epstein's survivors. They recounted the stories of rape and abuse at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein and his friends. The meeting was attended by members of the House Oversight Committee from both parties. Johnson later called the victims' stories, quote, heartbreaking and infuriating. Anti-trans activist, homophobe, and bigot Nancy Mace had a full-bore panic attack during that meeting. She stormed out of it in tears, claiming as a survivor herself, the words from the victims triggered her. Besides signing the discharge petition, Mace told reporters that she rejects Donald Trump's categorization of the Epstein files as, quote, a Democratic hoax. So I guess signing the discharge petition polls well for Nancy Mace. Alligator Alcatraz is back in business, at least for the time being. 2 weeks ago, U.S. District Judge Kathleen Williams ordered the penal colony closed after she ruled there was sufficient evidence to suggest the state of Florida failed to conduct the necessary environmental impact statements when building the migrant detention facility next to a nature preserve inside the Everglades. As I pointed out on the last show, she's more concerned about the alligators than she is the migrants. I reported on my last show that Florida was beginning to empty out Alligator Alcatraz, with several prisoners complaining of guards beating them randomly with batons as inmates complained of horrible living conditions. But now the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruling on Wednesday that Alligator Alcatraz can remain open while this case makes its way through the courts. I have exclusive video of some of the alligators who work at Alligator Alcatraz realizing they now have to get back to work, and their poker game came to an end. That might be artificial intelligence. And I don't think the alligators should be wearing ice vests. They don't work for ICE. They work for the state of Florida. They're employees of the state of Florida, not ICE. So whoever made that video thinking they could get one past me, I'm too smart. Well, this is the Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you so much for finding me. Please like this episode so I remain in your feed. Please share it and leave a comment. We have some good news. I have good news to report. The former mayor of New York City, alcoholic and insurrectionist, Rudy Giuliani, is out of the hospital and back at work. He's back at work. He's doing his podcast after spending 2 days in the hospital sustaining major injuries from a high-speed car crash on a New Hampshire highway. Giuliani hosted his show in a brace with a fractured thoracic vertebrae, multiple lacerations and contusions, as well as injuries to his left arm and lower leg. Giuliani on his show said he stopped on the highway after a woman flagged him down, begging for help, claiming she was the victim of domestic violence. Rudy dialed 911, his lucky number, 911, and after police arrived on the scene, an 18-year-old driver smashed into the car. Here is Rudy. This is exclusive. This is Rudy in the operating room as Bobby Kennedy Jr., not a doctor, performs the surgery. That was nice. And here is Rudy caught here leaving the hospital within hours of the surgery. You can see Bobby Kennedy Jr., who performed the operation, talked Rudy into the titanium bolts for the neck. Nice flare. I like that. It matches the tie. Rudy headed back to his studio to record his podcast. But first, he wanted to thank his surgeon, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., for doing such a great job stitching him back together. Nice. I think Bobby Kennedy also did something with his teeth. Bobby Kennedy, again, not a doctor. Hard to believe, watching the testimony, hard to believe Bobby Kennedy Jr., not a doctor. California Governor Gavin Newsom saying the federal government has spent so far $120 million on deploying National Guard soldiers and Marines to assist ICE agents and quell protests in Los Angeles. That would be $120 million for nothing. A federal judge on Tuesday ruling that Trump's deployment of nearly 5,000 troops inside Los Angeles violates the Posse Comitatus Act. But late Thursday, the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals temporarily lifted that decision in order to give the courts more time. So the Circuit Court of Appeals said, we're not discounting the lower court's ruling. We just need to think for a while. Right now, only 300 troops remain in Los Angeles as operations there begin winding down. President Trump, your thoughts?
A lot of people are saying maybe we like a dictator.
No, we're not. As I said, right now, only 300 National Guard soldiers are still patrolling Los Angeles. Governor Newsom is going to court asking those soldiers to be sent home. Newsom saying they didn't sign up for this when they joined the National Guard. Governor Newsom claiming Trump wants to keep those 300 soldiers in Los Angeles all the way through next year's midterms as a form of voter intimidation, which Newsom claims Trump will be using the guards to scare Californians into submission. Federal prosecutors were unable to convince a grand jury to indict a Justice Department employee who was arrested last month for tossing a Subway sandwich at ICE agents last month in Washington, D.C. He's free now to wander the streets, doesn't need a permit to buy another Subway sandwich. It's been said a prosecutor can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich. Apparently not if the weapon is a ham sandwich. Besides failing to get an indictment on the Subway sandwich attack, the Trump administration is finding it harder to convince judges and grand juries to cooperate with their bogus law and order crackdown in D.C. 2 people charged with threatening to kill Donald Trump were freed after 2 separate grand juries decided their words didn't meet the level of an actual threat. Prosecutors failed 3 times with 3 separate grand juries. They were not able to indict a woman accused of assaulting an FBI agent in D.C. and a man arrested for assault by a National Parks officer along with a National Guard soldier. That man now free to go after another grand jury failed to indict. On Wednesday, Republicans in Congress failed to get enough votes to censure Democratic Congresswoman LaMonica McIver of Newark, New Jersey, currently facing charges of assaulting an ICE agent after she attempted to inspect a for-profit detention center in her congressional district. The Congresswoman was pushed, if you saw the video, into an ICE agent, and her elbow touched his hand, and then she was immediately arrested, charged with assault, even though the ICE agent's boo-boo wasn't bad enough that he required any medical attention. The resolution to censure McIver was introduced by Clay Higgins of Louisiana. Higgins is on record claiming the FBI was behind January 6. His censure resolution failed by a vote of 217 to 207. 5 Republicans joined all the Democrats in voting against the censure. 2 other Republicans voted present. Ashli Babbitt will be given a funeral with full military honors, reversing a decision by President Biden, who decided the former Air Force veteran who served 12 years and was deployed to both Afghanistan and Iran, he decided she was undeserving of a full military burial. Babbitt was shot to death on January 6 while attempting to crawl through the window of a door that led to the Speaker's office. The Trump Justice Department recently agreed to settle for $5 million a wrongful death civil lawsuit filed by Ashli Babbitt's family. Trump referred to the black police officer, Capitol police officer, who shot Babbitt. Trump referred to him as, quote unquote, a thug, despite several investigations concluding that that officer saved the lives of several lawmakers by shooting Babbitt. She was an insurrectionist. Or if she was rioting, as Donald Trump says, the shooting starts when the looting starts, right? Trump's a big believer, even if it wasn't an insurrection. Donald Trump says looters should be shot. In March, Donald Trump talked of creating a restitution fund for all the January 6ers he pardoned, not just to reimburse them for their legal fees, but pay them for lost income while they were in jail awaiting prosecution and then while serving time. In the same interview, Trump called the January 6ers patriots who were treated unfairly. St. Louis personal injury attorney Mark McCloskey, working with several other lawyers, announcing plans earlier this year to sue the federal government on behalf of the January 6ers who were arrested. In August, McCloskey outlined plans for the government to set up a fund similar to the one for 9/11 survivors, administered by a special master who would decide unilaterally how much to award individual January 6ers and their families for the pain and suffering they incurred after storming the Capitol, intent on killing Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi, and sending nearly 150 Capitol police officers to the hospital, with 5 ultimately dying in the immediate aftermath. Someone pointed out this is like setting up a compensation fund for the families of the al-Qaeda terrorists who flew the planes into the Pentagon and the World Trade Center. You might remember Mark McCloskey. He's the one who is suing the government on behalf of the January 6ers and trying to get reparations for them. Mark McCloskey, you might remember him as the fire plug of a man, half man, if you will. You might remember when he and his wife, also a personal injury attorney, came to national prominence in 2020, pointing their weapons at Black Lives Matter protesters who were walking past the McCloskey's mansion in order to protest outside the mayor of St. Louis's home. They were marching peacefully, but McCloskey, seen here waving a military assault rifle, decided he was going to scare them. Look at him. He is clearly in the death throes of body dysmorphia. I don't care that he's much shorter than his wife, but he clearly does. Compare the size of his assault weapon versus her little pistol. It screams tiny man syndrome. Again, I have no problem with short men or short men who marry taller women, but McCloskey clearly does. Look at the size of his rifle. I'll protect you, honey. Look how big my assault weapon is. He's not only a member of the Bar Association, but the Lollipop Guild as well. Hey, he's a Republican, and he waved a weapon at Black Lives Matter protesters based on how they look, something they can't change. They're black, so he can't change the fact that he's shorter than his wife. I don't care. I don't care if I'm being unfair. McCloskey later pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor assault charge, while his wife pleaded guilty to harassment after a grand jury indicted both of them on illegal use of a weapon. The State Bar Association suspended their law licenses for only a year on charges of moral turpitude, a decision which made its way all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court upheld their 1-year suspension. What a loving couple. I wish I could be in a relationship like that. What do you think that marriage is like? Well, I can't think of any half man more qualified to represent the January Sixers than this guy, McCloskey. I can't think of any man or half man qualified to represent January Sixers, a man who pointed his gun at Black Lives Matter protesters. So imagine, as all of us have, if Black Lives Matter protesters on January 6 even so much as walked up the steps of the Capitol after being told not to. Imagine what the police response would have been that day. Rudy, you're a virulent racist. Rudy Giuliani, your thoughts on this?
Now the woman turns down the wall. Blah, blah.
What a great job Bobby Kennedy did on Rudy. Washington, D.C. got rid of the death penalty back in 1981, but Donald Trump, who now refers to himself as the chief law enforcement officer of our nation's capital, Trump now saying he wants to bring the death penalty back to Washington, D.C. for all murders. In 1992, the death penalty was put to a vote in a citywide referendum in Washington, D.C., and citizens of D.C. rejected the restoration of capital punishment, but Washington, D.C. is primarily black, so Trump couldn't care less what voters think. By the way, Mr. Law and Order, Donald Trump, is a convicted felon, an adjudicated rapist, and the last time he was president, Trump became the first president in 30 years to leave office with the nation's murder rate higher than it was when he entered. And that doesn't include the 1 million Americans Trump murdered by crapping the bed on COVID. When Trump took office in 2017, the nation's murder rate was at a 50-year low. Meanwhile, of the top 7 states in America with the highest murder rates, six out of the top 7 are red states. It's amazing to me how the people who talk the toughest about crime or restoring law and order are the least capable of doing anything about it because they're stupid. They think guns and sadism is how you stop crime instead of how you create it. Guns and sadism are what causes crime. It's pretty remarkable how Republicans claim they know how to fight crime, and liberals, they say, are too soft. Of the top 21 states with the highest crime rates, 17 out of those top 21 states voted for Trump in the last election. So to my foreign listeners, more proof that stupidity is lethal. We have stupid people in this country who rather watch others suffer than live in a safer world. Washington, D.C., despite what Trump wants you to believe, is far from the murder capital. It has the 19th highest murder rate of all the major cities in this country. It's not the fourth, despite Trump's lies. Trump says it has the fourth highest. It's the 19th highest. D.C. has a lower murder rate than cities in red states. Cities in red states like St. Louis, Cleveland, and New Orleans. But Republicans will say St. Louis, Cleveland, and New Orleans, they're not red, they're black. Violent crime in D.C. has fallen 2 straight years in a row. Why is this important? Because Trump declared a crime emergency in Washington, D.C. Said there's a crime emergency going on in Washington, D.C. in order to legally justify sending in the troops. There is no emergency. I just showed you. There is no emergency, the same way there is no economic emergency to justify his tariffs. But that's the legal basis of acting unilaterally on the tariffs. He claimed an economic emergency, even though when he came back into office, he inherited the most successful economy in American history 4 years after leaving it in shambles. I know the economy doesn't work for half this country, but based on the yardsticks they use to measure the economy, which are not fair, but based on the rules of the game, Joe Biden left Donald Trump the best economy in American history. Trump takes office, declares a national economic emergency, which gives him the unilateral power to decide what the tariffs are. So Trump doesn't believe any numbers that make him unhappy, like, the election results of 2020. The Bureau of Labor Statistics came out for the July jobs report, and they weren't good, so he fired the person who put those stats together. And he doesn't like Washington, D.C. claiming that there isn't a crime emergency. So his lapdog, chairman of the House Oversight Committee, Jim Comer, announcing he's holding hearings looking into how Washington, D.C. police manipulate crime statistics to make it look like the city's a lot safer than it actually is. Again, in order to legally justify sending in the troops, Trump on August 11th had to declare a crime emergency in Washington, D.C. There is no crime emergency. By law, Trump's crime emergency lasts 30 days. It expires next week on September 11th. He will then require a joint resolution from Congress to extend the deployment of the troops in Washington, D.C. past that date. Mr. Trump?
I'm not a dictator.
No, you're not a dictator because you want to be, but you fail at everything. You want to be a dictator, but you're a loser. Meanwhile, the attorney for Washington, D.C., filing suit against the Trump administration over the deployment of nearly 2,000 troops in his city. D.C. Attorney General Brian Schwab, a Democrat, telling judges that armed soldiers and ICE agents patrolling D.C. make residents less safe And they are hurting downtown businesses as well as tourism and real estate values. We see constant reports since the troops were sent in that restaurants are reporting 25 to 30% fewer customers. Why? Well, it turns out people don't like going out if it means accidentally shipped off to a dungeon in El Salvador. In his lawsuit, the D.C. attorney claims deploying the National Guard and ICE agents to perform routine police activity, quote, runs roughshod over a fundamental tenet of American democracy, and that is the military should not be involved in domestic law enforcement, posse comitatus, which Judge Breyer, the brother of the other Judge Breyer, ruled that does not apply to Los Angeles. The mayor of Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser, that's the wrong picture. That's Bowser from Sha-Na-Na. Thank you. Much better. The mayor of D.C., Muriel Bowser, admitting that carjackings are down since mid-August when Trump first ordered in the troops. But again, D.C. police reporting overall crime was at its lowest in more than 30 years before Trump decided to send in the National Guard. He was lying, claiming there was a crime emergency. Mr. President?
I'm a man with great common sense.
No, I think you're a man in the advanced stages of tertiary syphilis. At least that's what people are saying. I mean, I don't know if it's true. I hope it's not true, but why would I say it if it's not true? I hope it's not true. I'd hate to think that the leader of the free world is in the advanced stages of tertiary syphilis. So far this year alone, violent crime is down 24% in the nation's capital, which is amazing considering how many degenerates from the Trump administration moved there this year. The D.C. mayor is openly opposed to the troops. She's calling them inefficient, unnecessary, too expensive. She added, masked ICE agents grabbing people off the street makes residents feel less safe. I have video of some of these ICE agents, the way they talk to American citizens. It's unbelievable. I'm going to play some of these videos in a future episode. The Washington Post reporting that all of the National Guard soldiers deployed to the nation's capital come from red states with worse crime than Washington, D.C. There are other reports of these soldiers privately complaining they feel this is a complete waste of time and it's not what they signed up for, especially since many of them have been ordered to work on beautification of the city, cleaning up trash, spreading mulch, performing many of the tasks previously assigned to park service workers who have since been laid off thanks to Trump's budget cuts. CNN reporting that keeping soldiers in D.C. costs you and me, the taxpayers, $1 million a day. 2,200 National Guard soldiers collecting the trash in D.C., scrubbing graffiti. It leaves many believing that Trump is not just using them for political gain, but also sees our soldiers as a cheap source of labor. Americans serve in the National Guard to protect this country during national emergencies, not to do yard work, not to clean public restrooms because the government is too cheap to spring for janitors. Thanks to budget cuts, there are now only 20 national parks workers in Washington, D.C., 20 to take care of the city's more than, they have a couple of thousand acres of trees and grass. 20 workers now. Our soldiers aren't fighting crime, they're fighting grime. Our soldiers aren't fighting crime. Right, okay. Trump claiming the crime problem in D.C. is an emergency, justifying his sending in the troops. Well, To me and most Americans, this belies a lack of respect for our nation's military. The military, where neither Trump nor any of his sons served, despite America being at war when all these men were of draft age. The Washington Post reporting that the deploying of the troops to perform custodial work runs counter to claims made by our Christian white nationalist defense chief, Pete Hegseth, whose body is littered with neo-Nazi tattoos. Ever since taking over the Pentagon, a job Hegseth is eminently unqualified for, Pete Hegseth has been insisting his soldiers are trained in lethality. That it is the job of a soldier to kill and blow things up, and that's all they should be doing. But seeing our soldiers replacing topsoil, spreading mulch, pruning cherry trees, and emptying recycling bins kind of runs counter to Hegseth's narrative of his new muscular military. This is an actual recruitment poster Hegseth has unveiled, hoping more and more people will sign up for the military. It says, "We want you to mop our toilets." That's an actual recruitment poster that Hegseth is putting out. The advertising slogan used to be an army of one, but Hegseth is going with this recruitment poster, an image of a soldier scrubbing a toilet inside the visitor center at the Washington Mall with the words, "an army of number one." And this is an actual commercial featuring our soldiers with dirty mops cleaning the porta-sands out by the Lincoln Memorial with the words, "an army of number two." All right, there's Pete Hegseth celebrating alcohol on the front lawn of the White House. Sometimes he just decides, I'm going to celebrate the existence of alcohol, and he just gets himself Trump-faced. Our president has ordered the alcoholic, Pete Hegseth, to create a separate National Guard unit that will be on constant alert, ready to be deployed by Trump to quell any disturbance in any city around the country. Any imaginary disturbance Trump will have, according to this executive order, he will have about 600 National Guard soldiers now on standby for any emergency that he makes up. They will serve in what is called a quick reaction force with two separate units, one stationed in Arizona, the other in Alabama. What happened? That's not... There we go. CNN reporting that Trump is planning to ask Congress to pass legislation codifying into law a quick reaction force of 600 National Guard troops to be used at his own discretion. What could possibly go wrong? He's going to hire 10,000 extra ICE agents, and now he's going to have his own National Guard units. Trump's executive order, as it stands now, with clarification from the Pentagon, his executive order to send troops into Washington, D.C., allows those troops to carry M17 pistols and M4 rifles. I should mention, Trump, who was so concerned about crime, is himself a convicted felon. This is Trump in court last year with his two criminal defense attorneys. This is Todd Blanche, who now serves as our nation's deputy attorney general. And this homunculus is Emil Bove, who was the number 3 person at the Justice Department until last month when Trump nominated him to serve as a federal judge. And Bove was confirmed by the Senate on July 29th by a vote of 50-49. That's him celebrating. He's a fan of the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah, he loves winning. Bove was confirmed despite 3 whistleblowers willing to step forward, claiming Bove perjured himself during his confirmation hearings when he was asked about the deal he had struck with Mayor Eric Adams of New York City, the deal to drop the government's indictment of Adams in exchange for Adams agreeing to cooperate with ICE despite New York City being a sanctuary for migrants. 3 whistleblowers, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Chuck Grassley, refused to hear their testimony. Emil Bove is now a judge. And this is exclusive video of Bove practicing to be a judge. And he wants to bring back the British tradition of judges, barristers wearing wigs. This is video of him practicing the art of judging. Guess he needs to work harder at judging. This is the mop-up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you so much for finding me. Please share this episode. Please like it so I remain in your feed. Leave a comment. Anyway, back to that deal with Eric Adams to cooperate with ICE. With the Democratic Socialist candidate for mayor of New York City, Zohran Mamdani, leading in the polls, and a belief that disgraced former governor of New York and current disgraced mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, are splitting the vote of establishment Democrats, Donald Trump secretly offered a job at Housing and Urban Development to Eric Adams in the Trump White House. This is being reported by Politico, the New York Times, that Donald Trump has offered Eric Adams a job in the Trump White House if he drops out of the race, so Cuomo can get his votes. That's presumably what's going on. It's illegal. It's election interference. So, of course, Adams and the White House denying the report. But several reliable sources say somebody from the Trump administration offered Eric Adams a job in the White House, Housing, Urban, and Development, if he drops out. So, just a side note on how racist that job offer is. Eric Adams is black. And the only black member of Trump's cabinet is Scott Turner, who is Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. He was confirmed on February 5th, 2025. The only black cabinet member of Trump's first administration was Dr. Ben Carson, also Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. That's it. 2 black cabinet members, both running Housing, Urban, and Development, which is considered by Republicans, and I'm not making this up, to be a black job. And it's why Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, is supposedly being offered a job at Housing, Urban Development, HUD. Not to run it, but they're giving him a black job. The racism is unapologetic. I mean, I'm going to do an entire show about how they are just blatantly targeting black people in the Trump administration. Violent crime also down in Chicago, Baltimore, and New Orleans, but that's not stopping Trump. Did I mention he's a convicted felon? That's not stopping Trump from promising to send troops into those cities as well. For several weeks, despite protestations from the Democratic governor of Illinois and the Democratic mayor of Chicago, Trump has been threatening to ramp up both a military and ICE presence in Chicago. On Wednesday, Trump hinted, however, that his main focus, for at least the time being, is no longer Chicago, it's New Orleans. This after the Republican governor of Louisiana, Jeff Landry, saying he welcomes Trump's military deployment to solve the violent crime problem in New Orleans. Trump says he can solve it in 2 weeks. So if he sends the troops instead to New Orleans, he can do so. He can declare his imaginary crime emergency for New Orleans and not have the executive order tied up in the courts the way it is in Los Angeles, or should he go into Chicago, Baltimore, possibly Boston? The Times-Picayune, covering New Orleans, saying that the city's on track in 2025 to have the fewest numbers of killings in 50 years. Forbes reporting the murder rate in New Orleans is down 22% this year. Forbes adding that it's down 22% this year, even when you factor in the 14 people killed in New Orleans on New Year's Day after an American-born terrorist drove his car into a crowd and then opened fire. There is no crime emergency to justify deployment of our National Guard into New Orleans, Los Angeles, D.C., or Boston. It is not the best use of our National Guard. Right, Rudy Giuliani? Trump's imaginary war against Venezuela continues. Donald Trump released video of an airstrike on a Venezuelan boat he claimed was carrying drugs. 11 people were killed, but there's absolutely no evidence these people were drug dealers, or if the attack even took place, with the president of Venezuela claiming it was artificial intelligence. Appearing on Fox and Friends, Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth denied it was artificial intelligence, saying, quote, "We watched the attack live." Who's we? You? Your wife? Your 2 brothers? Just like the Yemen airstrike? There is a significant buildup of U.S. naval assets near Venezuela. It's described as the largest military presence down there since the first president, George Herbert Walker Bush, invaded Panama. 3 guided missile destroyers have been sent to Venezuela in August. That doesn't include other ships patrolling the region, along with an expeditionary force made up of 4,000 Marines and Navy personnel. Last month, Trump issued a secret executive order instructing the Pentagon to draw up plans for an invasion of Venezuela. Trump has repeatedly called the leader of Venezuela a narco-terrorist who has worked with several gangs, according to Trump, to invade the United States and wage war on our homeland. Trump has offered a $50 million reward for the leader of Venezuela. He wants to arrest him. All of this despite the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit ruling Wednesday that Donald Trump didn't have the right to cite the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, a wartime law. He cited the Alien Enemies Act in order to justify the rounding up of Venezuelan migrants and shipping them off to that prison in El Salvador. The court ruled there was no invasion or predatory incursion by a foreign power that would justify using the Alien Enemies Act. The Supreme Court will eventually decide whether Venezuela attacked us, whether Trinidad is an invading army, and whether or not the 2001 war authorization, which gives the president power to wage war on terrorists, applies to Trump if and when he invades Venezuela. He likes to tell us that he's using the military wisely, and he claimed success stopping narco-terrorists this week when our military took out a boat filled with drugs. And this is Donald Trump in his specially built Situation Room talking to the Joint Chiefs of Staff and how he wanted to attack that boat with Navy vessels And because he went to military school when he was a teenager. Here he is explaining how to do it. Trump is seen here explaining that it's important to rely on the element of surprise.
Wait, calling God, B.
Yeah, very good. And here, this is amazing. Using his amazing power of flatulence, Donald Trump was able to provide the Joint Chiefs of Staff what exactly they could expect once that ship was hit by American missiles. That is an amazing power. It's a superpower that he has. He can even fart through his mouth. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the, I know nobody likes the, that's artificial intelligence. A little artificial intelligence. It requires Photoshop, some other things. I got to stop. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room for keeping things civil. Leave a comment. I do have video. This is why we never went back to the moon. People always say, why didn't we go back to the moon? This is why we never went back to the moon. Houston, we have a problem. A problem. What else do I have here? Oh, after Donald Trump insisted the United States take a 10% stake in Intel, you've heard about that. Our government now owns 10% of the chip manufacturer, Intel. Intel thanked the president by giving him a prototype of their new smart toilet. This is the new smart toilet from Intel. Trump can now do his business while he's doing his business. The secret to the smart toilet from Intel is you got to buy a pair of pants with an ass zipper. But that is Trump enjoying the new Intel smart toilet. Pretty great stuff there. But you need to buy, see, they gave him the toilet for free, but you got to buy the pants with the ass zipper. And, oh yes, there's new photographic evidence suggesting Rudy Giuliani is actually Prince William's father. This is an old photograph. I don't see the similarity. But they're saying Rudy father. All right. I'm going to try to do a show tomorrow. Thank you for listening. Sorry about the AI and the Photoshop and the Premiere Pro and the sound effects and all that stuff. Hang on, I'm getting a call from my dead grandmother. All right. Yes. Well, I'm glad you're dead and that this show sucks and that you don't have to explain me to your friends now that you're dead, Grandma. But a little love would be nice. Oh, Jesus.